It's very hard to actually decipher what is the predominant purpose of a disc jockey. They have many duties. They are a companion to many people out there in the wilderness. They are communicating music. They are actually playing with people's lives in so much as people have spent a lot of money, gone into recording studios, made various projects, and there they are all of a sudden, a kind of their life in your hands, in the hands of the disc jockey. So he has a tremendous responsibility to deliver the music in the very best way that he can and try, I think, very much not to interfere with it too much.
I was thinking...
To the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Greetings, music lovers.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass, there's a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along.
I remember listening to the radio when I was, well, I suppose I started listening when I was about 4 or 5. And the radio programs in those days were very different. Music was very different. But I remember, as a lad of about 9 or 10, I was playing one day with a tennis racket and a ball, and I was hitting this ball against a wall, and I was actually kind of being Walter Mitty-ish. I thought to myself, yes, I'm probably a better tennis player than Lou Hode or Ken Rosewell, who were the stars of the tennis circuits in those days. And all of a sudden, this voice came from my radio set, and I actually stopped. And I was knocked for 6. I was stunned by the sound of this Italian soprano, who actually sort of sang like a bird. She was known as the world's nightingale. Her name was Toti Del Monte, and she was an old Italian prima donna. That was about 1936, I suppose, 37, something like that. And this voice just took over my whole being. I was besotted by this lady, like people have been besotted by Elvis Presley, by Led Zeppelin, by all kinds of artists. And she was actually my hero, or my heroine. I then came across a singer, an American baritone by the name of John Charles Thomas. And his voice was absolutely thrilling. It was very melodic, very different, of course, from the coloratura soprano that she sang in. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to sing like this man.
Sing a song of sixpence, a pocket full of rye, 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie.
He had this lovely voice. It was, I could really identify it with it as a male. It was melodic and it flowed. And for the very first time in my life, I must have been about 12, 13 by then, I thought, yes, I have a purpose in life. I'm going to sing like this man. I'm going to go and have singing lessons. And I got this voice tutor, and I went and had singing lessons, the art of vocalizing, which was extremely difficult. And I also had a slight disadvantage because I was an asthmatic. And while I could get the voice in position all right, the chest wouldn't allow me to produce the tones that I wanted to. And I went to a recording studio and said, look, I want to record 2 songs. I suppose by then I must have been about 17 or 18. And I went and sang these 2 songs. And the man played the tape back to me. And I actually wanted to commit suicide. Because in my Walter Mitty dreams, I had heard Mr. John Charles Thomas singing in all his splendid glory. And I was so impatient to be like this. I heard the tapes back, and it was... the bottom dropped out of my world. And I thought, my God, don't do it. It'll never happen. But I felt that I had to get near music. I was very musical, but I never had the vocal equipment to do what I wanted to do. So I thought to myself, well, if I can't do that... There were people known as crooners. There was Perry Como and Frank Sinatra, who were enormously talented, couldn't sing like the people that I was really revering. And I thought, well, perhaps I can sing like them. I just had to do something musical. And I was working at a very large timber company in Australia as an assistant paymaster and an assistant trainee accountant. And I had a couple of friends who worked at a radio station in Melbourne. One of them was Phil Gibbs. He had a very good voice, and he used to do sports programs and all that sort of thing. And he rang me up one night after work, and he said, how would you like to audition to become a radio announcer? And I laughed hysterically. I said, that's the funniest thing you've ever said to me as long as I've known you. I mean, I think it would be fun, but let's talk about something else. He said, no. He said, I'm deadly serious. He said, I think you have a good voice. He said, and if you have the application, would you like to do an audition? So anyway, I went to the station, was duly given a script, and in my very best manner, I read a couple of commercials and did one or two introductions, and that was that. And the next day, I got a ring from this broadcaster again named Phil Gibbs, and he said, they love your audition, and he said, they'd like to give you a job, but there's a terrible problem. I said, yes, what's that? He said, you sound very much like Norman Banks. It's uncanny. And Norman Banks on Australian radio was the equivalent to a Richard Dimbleby. He was revered. I mean, he was a tremendous broadcaster who could do all kinds of things. And so the station wouldn't take me on. And no station in Melbourne would take me on because I sounded like this guy named Norman Banks.
We have for you now, ladies and gentlemen, the result of last Monday's popularity poll. Number 1, the ballet music from Lacefield Feed. Number 2, Carnival ballet music. 3, the Intermezzo. 4, España. 5, All in the April Evening. 6, I Love Thee. 7, Questo or Quella. 8, Celeste Aida. 9, The Gypsy and the Bird. And 10, Dance of the Lofty Girls. Bad luck that no one was able to forecast that order. The best entries placed the first 4 items only in order. And the first of these to be opened came from Mr. J. Dalziel of 15 Martin Street, Canterbury. Having delivered those glad tidings to Mr. Dalziel, one lucky home lover, on behalf of the Meyer Emporium, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you all a very good night and trust that peace and happiness may fill your home until we meet again.
So having been turned down by the radio stations because I sounded like Mr. Norman Banks, I thought, well, what the hell can I do? And all of a sudden an alternative was offered to me. The audition tape was sent over to Tasmania, which is just across the sea from Australia, and 7LA, a station called 7LA in Launceston. And they said, we like that, and would you like to come and do a year with us here in LA? So off I go to Tasmania, and all of a sudden, I'm what's known as a radio personality, with a long, long way to go. I remember at 7LA, all those records they were playing, like it was Teresa Brewer and Rosemary Clooney and Frank Sinatra and Pat Boone. I think the very first record I ever played was K-Star singing The Wheel of Fortune.
The Wheel of Fortune goes spinning around.
I stayed there for a whole year at 7LA and slowly got experience. And then I got a ring from Melbourne, and there was a station called 3AK, and it was the voice of the night. And the job was from 12 midnight till 7 in the morning. And they actually offered it to me, because I wouldn't be in competition to Mr. Banks, because when he was doing his shows, I'd be sleeping, and I would only be broadcasting to a night mob from 12 midnight till 7 in the morning. So all of a sudden, I'm back in Melbourne, I'm in radio working for 3AK, and I remember one night it was hysterical. I was on air playing a Frank Sinatra album from start to finish. And, of course, my one avid listener was my mother, who became an insomniac, never slept. She listened to me every night. And I remember being on the air, and it was about 4 in the morning. And all of a sudden, I was startled by a ringing phone. And I had, in fact, dozed off and gone to sleep. And I picked up the phone, and in my confusion, I said, hello, and there was my mother. And she said, darling, I'm sorry, but I think it's finished. And I looked round, and there was the album going... And, of course, all of a sudden, 3AK fired me. And there I was again without a job. And funnily enough, at that particular stage, I keep harking back to Mr. Banks, I'm sorry. But Mr. Banks, this powerful man in radio, had had a difference with the management. And the management surprisingly fired him. And he went from 3KZ to 3AW. And all of a sudden, 3KZ say, hey, let's get Freeman.
Salutations, salutations, and welcome, neighbours. This is Alan Freeman, and once again the invitation is to come with us on another musical journey. So let's get on our way and go rolling down the line.
Rolling down the line, my darling, rolling down the line. You and I are together, rolling down the line.
And now, Mr. Freeman, it's time for 3 minutes of concentrated sentiment. You have a song to suit the occasion?
Well, Jim, this should just about fill the bill, I think. Unforgettable, that's what you are.
And while I was doing all this, playing all this Rosemary Clooney bits and Johnny Ray and Nat King Cole and Pat Boone, etc., all of a sudden this film Blackboard Jungle came out. And, of course, then Bill Haley hit. And I didn't understand it. I was terrified when I saw the film. And then very slowly, I started getting rather attuned to it. And I started rather jumping around. And I started to like the rhythms. And, of course, we were playing all kinds of things in those days. I think Little Richard was just about happening. It was incredible.
So golly, Miss Molly, so like the ball. So golly, Miss Molly, so like the ball. When you're rocking out a rolling, can't hear your mama call.
It was relatively small at 3KZ in Melbourne. And a lot of my chums were doing the Aussie thing. They were saving up their money, and they were booking their fares either on a plane or on a boat. And I thought to myself, I really must see what the other side of the world is like. I really must investigate and have a look around. And I went to KZ and I said, I'm going to make a trip to London and Europe for 9 months, and I hope that when I come back, I might be able to reapply for my job. And they said, oh, yes, sure, when you come back, you know, I'm sure your job will still be here for you. You might like to do something in England while you're there and bring us back some interesting information or whatever. And so I came over here very happily to have 9 months gas round the world and see how it all happened. I remember when we arrived in the English Channel in April 1957, and I went up on deck, and I saw the white cliffs of Dover. And all of a sudden, the seagulls were flying above, squawking. And I turned to my companion on the boat and I said, it's just like the Frank Chacksfield record of Ed Time. I said, it really exists. The very first thing I wanted to do when I got to London was to hear the BBC. I mean, the BBC. I mean, you know, Jesus second. So I got into this little flat I'd arranged, and I turned on the radio, and I was fiddling about, and all of a sudden I heard Frank Sinatra singing. I can't remember what it was. And the record finished, and this voice came in and said, and that was Frank Sinatra on a gramophone record. I actually fell about. I thought, that's Frank Sinatra on a gramophone record? Well, yes, I would think so. I don't think he flew over especially to sing that one. And I couldn't get over the gentleness of British radio, because I'd come from commercial radio in Australia, where it was all fairly brash and vaguely rather like American radio, and all of a sudden here was this mighty British Broadcasting Corporation, sounding so quiet and so dainty. And I thought, my God, they need a charge here, don't they? That was my very first thought, and I thought, well, nothing to do with me, because I'm not going to work here anyway. And then I went to a party, and a guy said to me, hey, Alan, he said, you're a disc jockey, aren't you? And I said, well, I'm a disc jockey to a point. I'm a presenter, I suppose. I'm a radio announcer, really. He said, well, look, Radio Luxembourg are auditioning disc jockeys for summer relief. He said, why don't you go along as a giggle? So I went off to Luxembourg, and I forget who I spoke to at Luxembourg, and he said, what do you think of radio here? I said, it's a bit dull, love, isn't it? So I sat down. He gave me a load of requests to read, and some records to play, which I did. And then he said to me, yes, that was fairly adequate, we'll let you know. So I went home and the phone rang about 3 hours later. And he said, oh, hello, it's Radio Luxembourg here. He said, Mr. Freeman, he said, could you do a summer season in Luxembourg? And I couldn't believe it was happening.
Well, I don't even think when you say goodbye.
The Warner Brothers label, yet again from the Everly Brothers, That'll Be the Day. And for your pop pickers, that's the record Night Tonight. So remember, it's tomorrow night at 9. All right? Right. And that means good night.
When I got to Luxembourg, I thought to myself, well, now, I wonder exactly what I'm going to do and how I'm going to do it. But I thought that radio generally needed a bit of brightening up. I thought we need a bit more drive. That's because I had been influenced, really, by what I'd heard in Australia and worked amongst, and from what I'd heard from America. Because, you see, back in Australia, you kept your job because you were a good seller. You see, in radio here, in the 80s, your commercials in commercial radio are done by all other people, and they are played into shows. In Australia, if you were doing a show, say, as I was, the Oxford show, you had to read these commercials while you were actually doing your show, and if you didn't sell, you were out.
Oxford, the show that's bright and gay. Oxford, a winner all the way. Step right up and meet all the team, and you'll find...
Hey, Alan, you'll need to look to your laurels, you know. I see that Johnny Ray's been invited to Australia.
Don't worry, Jim. I'll follow Johnny's own success formula, you know. If at first I don't succeed, I'll cry again.
What have you got to cry about, Alan?
Let's see. I know. I've got a painful chilblain.
Don't cry about chilblains, old son. Relieve the pain with Oxford Pinoclean.
Oh, Jim, you're kidding. Pinoclean for chilblains.
Yes, that definitely. A listener wrote in and told us all about it. Her son has always suffered from chilblains, but bathing them with Pinoclean solution took all the soreness and itch away and gave him wonderful relief. You try it. Here's a bottle. Now go and try some.
It soothes hives and mosquito bites, too, and helps heal cuts and scratches.
Wonderful, isn't it? You know,
My word, yes. Pinoclean is the most powerful of disinfectants, and yet when used as directed, Jim, Pinoclean is also safest, most soothing and antiseptic.
Oh, yes, that's because Oxford Pinoclean is 100% pure, Alan, and does not contain any substance likely to irritate sensitive skins. In fact, Oxford Pinoclean is as important in your first aid kit as in the household cleaning equipment.
You know, Jim, I believe you're right. That Pinoclean has eased my chilblains already.
Berenson's always right. That's why I know there'll be grand applause when I introduce our next artists, the clever, charming Whistle Sisters.
So, of course, I think more than anything, I developed the art of selling, and then all of a sudden I found that what I liked about what I was doing, even in playing records, I liked the sell. Not necessarily trying to lead people astray, but I would get terribly excited about the product that I was involved with, And I'm not quite sure whether my motives or my thoughts were right in my disc jockeying in the days of Radio Luxembourg, but they've stuck with me ever since. And the great kick that I've always got out of jockeying, both for Luxembourg and the BBC and for Capital, is to actually be excited about the product if one really believes in it. And of course, in those sponsored days of Radio Luxembourg, even though the records were chosen by the company for you to play, they really were, on a whole, very good records. And so one was always very excited about them anyway. And I always think that any jockey who plays records and is not excited by what he's playing anyway, then I think he's got it slightly wrong.
She's a groovy gal, that one. Janet Richmond and Senora. Almost time to go, but here's the saber dance.
Somehow, and I really wish I could remember this, I found myself at the BBC doing an audition, I think for Teddy Warwick. I think one of the first shows I ever did was called Records Around 5. And the BBC got a terrible shock because I was called into an office by somebody who said, "Heard the show, old chap, but it's all a little too brash and you must tone it down." And I thought, God blimey, I've blown it again.
The Francis Bay Orchestra and Saber Dance. It's like I said, time I wasn't here.
So I was doing all these other shows, and at the same time I was doing a sponsored program on Luxembourg for Philips Records. And a most astonishing thing happened. This was about 1961, I think. 1961. I got a phone call from Philips, and they said, "Oh, by the way, Alan, it's Fred Bloggs here from Philips. This is just to tell you that our sales have never been better. We have never sold more records, and you're fired." And I'd planned to go to New York, you see. Had to see New York. And, of course, then all of a sudden I'm fired by Philips, and I'm getting me like 5 guineas, I think, from the BBC for whatever I was doing. And I thought, I can't go to New York because I can't afford it. And I thought, oh, to hell with it. I'm going to go to New York anyway. So off I go to New York, have a ball, come back here to London. And at that stage, before I went to New York, I just more or less met an agent named Bunny Lewis. And Bunny Lewis handled David Jacobs and several artists, and I came back and he said, while you've been away, he said, a couple of things have happened. There's been an inquiry for you to do this, and there's been an inquiry for you to do something else, he said, and you're taking over Pick of the Pops from David Jacobs.
Before we do spin those top 3 discs of the day, let's meet the man who'll be in charge of Pick of the Pops as of next week, Alan Freeman. All right, Fluffy?
Hi, David.
Tell me just what's going to happen next week.
Well, next week in Pick of the Pops, we're going to have 3 20-minute segments at 9:40, 10:40, and 11:20. In the first 2 segments of 20 minutes, we're going to present the new discs, the new releases. I hope I have the same wisdom as you in picking them. And from 11:20, all the current top 20 hit paraders.
All the current top 21?
Well, not all of them, but some of them.
Yes.
Most of them.
You will.
The good ones.
All right, then. Well, we look forward to listening to you, and I'd like to wish you every possible success with what, to me, has been a jolly fun program to do.
Thank you very much, David, and may I say congratulations on 5 years of magnificent Pick of the Pops program. Oh, in conclusion, can I say one thing?
You may. Yes.
What about all this rock, then?
Well, Alan, the master of it himself. In comes Mr. P.
A very old friend came by today, 'cause he was telling everyone in town of the love that he just found, and Marie's the name. A way to swing.
The controller of Radio 1, who was then a producer, Derek Chinnery, came to me one day, and he said, Alan, look, he said, I've got this record here. He said, it's cute. He said, you might even like to play it. He said, you might even be able to use it as a theme. You never know. So I put it on, and it was Brian Fay's rendition on Columbia or Parlophone, I think it was, by the Brian Fay Orchestra of ding ding little little dum bum bum bang bang, you know, da 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 dum. And I thought, oh yes, that's got a lot of staccato in it, and that moves along, and it's very, very cute. And the more I listened to it, the more I thought to myself, oh yes, we could use this possibly as a theme. There's a lot I could do with this. You know, the opening of the drums, like bing, 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 bom, bom, something, something, da, 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 da. And I thought to myself then, you know, I was getting a little browned off with hearing disc jockeys refer to the people listening to them as ladies and gentlemen. Not that they weren't ladies or gentlemen, I'm quite sure, but it sounded so foreign. It sounded akin to me, and I thought, who are these people who listen to pop programs? What do we call them? They're the pop listeners. They're listening to these records, and they're probably picking the ones they like the best. That's what they are. They're pop pickers. And I thought to myself, I'll say, ding 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 boom boom bum bum. Hi there, pop pickers. Da da da. I thought that's a start. And so it all developed from there, and I found that it was a very interesting theme, and I found it had lots of drive. And whenever you put this record on the turntable, it doesn't matter where you turn it down or bring it up. It doesn't matter where. It could always be the start of something or the finish of something. And so that's how the sign of the swinging cymbal developed. And while I was doing Pick of the Pops, I was living in a flat in Kensington on top of Ann Todd's house. And Anne and I used to have little tete-a-tetes on the telephone. And I was talking to her one day, and I said, we were planning to go and see a film together. And I said to Anne, okay, then, so it's tomorrow at such and such a time, thing. I put the phone down, and I walked away from it, and the phone rang again instantly. And it was Anne on the phone, and she said, what did you say then? And I said, I'll see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock or whatever it was, and we'll go and see this film. No, she said, you said something else before you put the phone down. And I said, no, I didn't, love. I said, I'll see you at 7 o'clock, and that's it. And, no, she said, you said something else, and it's very, very important. Well, I said, look, if I think of it, I'll ring you back. All right. She said, that's it. I said, that's what? She said, all right. You've got to use that in your program, because it sounds so infectious. So I got the swing and cymbal again, ding, ding, you know, at the end, where it goes bump, 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 and it was, all right, bump, bump, right, bump, bump. I thought, what the hell do we say? All right, good night. No, can't say it's good night, because it's afternoon. Stay bright, I thought. All right, bump, 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 right, bump, bump, stay bright, bump, bump. And that's actually how it happened. It was all due to Ann Todd.
All right. Right. Pretty bright.
And here is the top 10. Up 7 places. Number 10, Automatically Sunshine from the Supremes. Down at 9, Circles, New Seekers. Down at number 8, I Can See Clearly Now from Johnny Nash. Up 5 places. Number 7, Silver Machine from Hawkwind. Down at 6, Rock and Roll Part 2 from Gary Glitter. Down at number 5 this week, Breaking Up Is Hard to Do from the Partridge Family. Up 1 place, number 4, Seaside Shuffle, Pterodactyl and the Dinosaurs. And here is the top 3. Down at 3, Sylvia's Mother, Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show. Up 4 places, number 2, Schools Out from Alice Cooper. And still at number 1 is Puppy Love from Donny Osmond. It's on the way. Number 1, Donny Osmond.
Eventually, Pick of the Pops was enlarged, and I think it became a 2-hour show. And I remember talking to Dennis Jones, my producer, who was an absolute joy to work with, great fun. And I said to Dennis, you know, Dennis, when we're playing these new releases, we are in fact almost becoming a dumping ground for company plugs. i.e., if Dusty Springfield was in the charts with a smash hit, there was obviously a new release coming out. And so all of a sudden, as well as being in the top 20, she had a new release, which we would put in as a newcomer. And I thought to myself, this is probably getting all a little boring. So I thought about it, and in the interim, there was this mystic gentleman, John Peel, who was following Pick of the Pops, I think with Top Gear. And very slowly, when I finished Pick of the Pops, I would listen to this John Peel and the music he was playing. And I thought, yeah, that's even better. Because he was playing some very abstract music by these rock musicians. And, of course, in those days, they were all considered long-haired, uncouth, unwashed layabouts. So I said to Dennis, why don't we get really adventurous, and why don't we play something very different, for instance, like Led Zeppelin. As time went on, it was decided that Pick of the Pops would come off. So I was told, look, we're going to take Pick of the Pops off. So what we're going to do is to offer you an afternoon series of 5 days a week. And I thought, oh, yeah, fine. Very sad at the thought that Pick of the Pops may end, but, you know, nothing is forever, they say. So, of course, eventually Pick of the Pops did finish, and I was doing this afternoon series on Radio 1, and it was very different to Pick of the Pops. I wasn't dealing just specifically with the charts and all this tremendous staccato style, except this kind of style I didn't want to desert. And I remember I used to make up my own little jingles for the afternoon show, and and the controller one got quite furious, because rather than play Radio 1 is wonderful, I would get some Black Sabbath jingle that, you know, that sort of blew the transmitter apart, and I used to enjoy doing all those kind of things. But I wanted to keep that same staccato style on, because although I wasn't just playing necessarily a top 20, the records were still important. And in fact, they were more important because they were new releases. And we were playing in those days very little old stuff at all. So we decided to incorporate some features into this afternoon show. For instance, we inaugurated Youth Club Call, because I thought that there were little youth clubs all around the country that were possibly, they felt, were insignificant themselves, and if they were given a mention nationally, it might add a little luster and regenerate action within the youth club. We had Get It Off Your Chest, where you could complain about things. And then we inaugurated Poets' Corner, where I used to read these poems terribly badly, and I would read them to backing music from Black Sabbath. And finally, I have a poem here from Angela Mary Ingleby of 6 Wold View, Millington in Yorkshire, and it's called The Sinner. I watched the leaves turn bronze and flutter to the ground. A harsh wind blew them in circles far away. They never saw me. I watched the snowflakes cascade to the ground, making the streets and fields into a carousel. They never saw me. I watched the daffodils appear, and the trees once more adorned. The birds sung songs of praise. They never saw me. I smelt the scent of new-mown hay. I watched the sun tan children play. They never saw me. I touched a rose and plucked a lily. And now, as every season comes and goes, my heart is light, my soul is free from sin. Once more, I belong among God's beautiful things. Thank you very much indeed, Angela. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We had a stack of poems that arrived today. Absolutely incredible. And if you'd like to send your poem into Poets' Corner, the address is Poets' Corner, the Alan Freeman Show, Radio 1, BBC, London, W1A, 4WW. All right?
I like it. It's this week's Freeman's Fancy. I like it. Are you liking it too?
Here's Melanie.
I rode my bicycle past your window last night. I roller skated to your door at daylight. Yeah.
And then eventually, after that, I was called into the offices here at the BBC, where Derek Chinnery, who I think was head of Radio 1 at that particular stage, and he said to me, he said, "You keep playing these strange jingles of this rock music." He said, "You appear to like it. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you 2 hours to do what you like." And I thought, my God, I don't believe it. Hello, we won the pools. It's bonus time. And I said, "Well, that's fabulous. When?" He said, "On Saturday afternoons between 3 and 5. And my world fell apart because at that particular stage, it was the gutter as far as ratings went. And I thought, oh, I think we're almost being pensioned off. Anyway, we can do as we like, we said. So I was then introduced to a tremendous buddy of mine, Tony Wilson, who was the producer of the show. And Tony and I got together. Tony said, well, let's talk about themes and all that sort of thing. And I thought, I know what we'll do. We'll have a rock show, and we'll splice it up with, like, Emerson, Lake and Palmer and a bit of Mozart, and we'll have a bit of Beethoven and some Joan Baez, and we'll have some Tangerine Dream and a bit of Rossini. And, of course, when I think back in retrospect, I mean, I really was on a hiding to nothing, because here I was on a Saturday afternoon between 3 and 5, having been... It's very hard to actually decipher what is the predominant purpose of a disc jockey. They have many duties. They are a companion to many people out there in the wilderness. They are communicating music. They are actually playing with people's lives in so much as people have spent a lot of money, gone into recording studios, made various projects, and there they are, all of a sudden, a kind of their life in your hands, in the hands of the disc jockey. So he has a tremendous responsibility to deliver the music in the very best way that he can, and try, I think, very much not to interfere with it too much.
I was thinking,
to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Greetings, music lovers.
It's very hard to actually decipher what is the predominant purpose of a disc jockey. They have many duties. They are a companion to many people out there in the wilderness. They are communicating music. They are actually playing with people's lives in so much as people have spent a lot of money, gone into recording studios, made various projects, and there they are, all of a sudden, a kind of their life in your hands, in the hands of the disc jockey. So he has a tremendous responsibility to deliver the music in the very best way that he can, and try, I think, very much not to interfere with it too much.
I was thinking,
It's very hard to actually decipher what is the predominant purpose of a disc jockey. They have many duties. They are a companion to many people out there in the wilderness. They are communicating music. They are actually playing with people's lives in so much as people have spent a lot of money, gone into recording studios, made various projects, and there they are, all of a sudden, a kind of their life in your hands, in the hands of the disc jockey. So he has a tremendous responsibility to deliver the music in the very best way that he can, and try, I think, very much not to interfere with it too much.
I was thinking,
to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside.
Greetings, music lovers.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We're so glad you could attend. Come inside, come inside. There behind the glass stands a real blade of grass. Be careful as you pass. Move along, move along.
I remember listening to the radio when I was, well, I suppose I started listening when I was about 4 or 5. And the radio programs in those days were very different. Music was very different. But I remember, as a lad of about 9 or 10, I was playing one day with a tennis racket and a ball, and I was hitting this ball against a wall, and I was actually kind of being Walter Mitty-ish. I thought to myself, yes, I'm probably a better tennis player than Lou Hode or Ken Rosewell, who were the stars of the tennis circuits in those days. And all of a sudden, this voice came from my radio set, and I actually stopped. And I was knocked for 6. I was stunned by the sound of this Italian soprano, who actually sort of sang like a bird. She was known as the world's nightingale. Her name was Toti Del Monte, and she was an old Italian prima donna. Came across a singer, an American baritone by the name of John Charles Thomas, and his voice was absolutely thrilling. It was very melodic, very different, of course, from the coloratura soprano that she sang in. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do. A great vacancy. And so anyway, I travelled around and things happened. I got a phone call one day from Aidan Day. And Aidan Day used to produce me on several programmes here at the BBC. He was now controller of programmes for Capital Radio. And he said to me, listen, you're doing nothing. Come and join us. And in my 6 years with Capital, my main mission has been the Monday Night Rock Show, which is, of course, a replica of the Saturday Rock Show that I did on the BBC. And it's quite amazing, because when people come down into the London area, they hear the rock show on a Monday night, and I get these letters swarming in from everywhere saying, God, great, you're still doing the rock show. If only we could hear Capital up in Scotland or wherever, you know. And then it was in 1982 that Tim Blackmore's head of music called me into his office and said, I've had an idea. And I said, oh, yeah, what? What about Pick of the Pops? And I said, Tim, don't talk about bringing Pick of the Pops back. I said, I think that in 1962 to 1972, it was quite an entertaining program. I said, but don't talk about Pick of the Pops again in the 1980s. I said, it will never work. But he was absolutely persistent. And he said, well, we could do Pick of the Pops Take 2. We could do a current top 15, and we could match it with a 15 of the very same week, but of another year. And it would be very, very interesting. Anyway, we did Pick of the Pops, and I was very, very reluctant. I mean, I sat in the studio, and I sat about 4 miles from the microphone, sort of saying, hi there, pop pickers, and here we go again, but I'm not really here, and this is a figment of your imagination, and I somehow got through the program. And then Tim showed me some results of a very quick consensus of listeners that had been done around the capital area, and figures on a Saturday morning had absolutely ricocheted, and they were astronomical. And so there was nothing I could do but go on with the show. And so I eventually again threw myself into the show, like 5 million years later. Funnily enough, I walked into the Capitol foyer one day, and there was a group of young people in there, all about 12, 13. And I thought to myself, I really must dodge round the edge of these, because they wouldn't know me from the bar or soap. And all of a sudden, one of the lads turned round. He was about 12. And he said, Fluff! He said, my hero. Da, 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 da. And I thought, my God, here we go again. Most people know me as Fluff, Alan Fluff Freeman, and I've been often asked as to how it all happened. It actually happened in Australia when I was working at 3KZ, and I was doing a night party program. And I used to do this show back in 1953, 54, 55, 56, in a pair of jeans. Funny enough, jeans were around in those days. And this greasy old white sweater I had, it was a submarine sweater. And over the years, it progressively got quite black. And one day I thought to myself, I really must take this into a dry cleaners, and I must get it clean because I can't be seen wearing this anymore. So I took it into the dry cleaners, and I went and collected it. And it actually looked like a sheep. It had blossomed out anew. There was sheeps everywhere. So I put on the sweater, walked in. There was a woman standing there, and she looked at me in absolute stark silence. And her words were, "Bloody hell, it's Fluffy Freeman." And the name has stuck ever since. That's how we got the name Fluff.
Radio was produced by Kevin Howler. The series consultant is Tim Blackmore. Future programs will feature Paul Gambaccini, Noel Edmonds, John Peel, Steve Wright, Tony Blackburn, and next week at this time, it's Jimmy Savile.